I'm your consumer investigator, Dale Cardwell, and we are glad you're watching Trust Dale TV. Just think, if it weren't for marriage, men would go through their entire lives thinking they had no faults at all. Okay, that was real bad. But some of the easiest jokes to tell are about marriage because so many people need to find humor in their difficult situations. With us today is attorney Lee Meriwether of the law offices of Meriwether and Tharp. Hey, Lee, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. As I mentioned, divorce can be really tough, and people make light of it sometimes because it is such an agonizing situation. But sometimes they can be avoided. And how often do you guys counsel people and say, I think you can keep this together?
We do it a lot. In fact, but divorce should be the last step. And often we'll talk to people and try to convince them to try counseling, sometimes financial counseling. We are strong believers that if a marriage is irretrievably broken, that we owe it to our potential clients to make sure that they've taken every step to stay married. I personally am passionate about it. My wife and I have even started a podcast called Healthy Married Life.
Oh, that's great. But if the marriage is not going to last, you have some do's and don'ts you can suggest.
Absolutely. I have two main do's and one main don't. Because every case is different, it's difficult to give specifics, but in general, number one, if the marriage is at an end, it's very important to figure out what all your assets are, your liabilities, gather as much paperwork as possible to make sure you have a complete understanding of the marital estate, as well as an understanding of your total gross income and what ongoing everyday expenses you have. That's number one. Number two, come to the table with the right attitude. If you come in with a scorched earth, win at all possible odds attitude, the only winners are going to be the lawyers. It is best to work things out, especially if there are children involved, because you're going to have to be dealing with your spouse for the rest of your life when it comes to your children. The number one don't is do not play games. Often some people will try to hide money or try to make themselves seem like they're something they're not, and it all comes out in court. You're better off just laying everything on the table and being perfectly honest.
Even if the divorce is amicable and both parties are willing to work together, there needs to be some sort of an exit strategy for what the parties are trying to achieve?
Yes, and we try to help them with that exit strategy. We do it in three ways. Number one, we give them the tools so they can talk to their spouse and work out an amicable agreement between the two of them. We tell them what are the main points they need to be concerned about. Number two, we make sure that whatever they do reach in an agreement is spelled out in the right way and something that they can follow through on. What people don't realize is even if you enter into an agreement, it becomes a court order, and if you violate that agreement, you can actually be held in contempt of court. And the third thing that we do is that we help, we don't just look at the exit strategy for tomorrow, we try to look a year, 2, 3, even 10 years out, depending on how old the children are.
Even with so much at stake, I bet you get people saying, I need to do this cheaply. How often do you hear that, and what do you tell them?
We hear it often. There's two things that we usually tell them. Number one is that they can save money on their divorce by working out as many things with their spouse as possible. When there are children involved, usually the best thing to do is work out what kind of parenting times each parent's going to have. The more they can work out, the better it is for their children and the better it is for their pocketbook. Number two, don't exclude your lawyers, because as I said earlier, the agreement that you enter into becomes a court order, so it's important to keep your lawyer in the process, even if you're trying to save money, because you don't want to enter into an agreement that could cause you problems years down the road.
Give us at least one more good piece of advice on how someone should decide who to hire as their attorney.
That's easy. The most important thing is to feel comfortable with your lawyer, and here's why. Because there will come a point in the divorce, especially if you haven't been able to settle it all along, that your lawyer's going to have to tell you something that you don't want to hear. And if you don't feel comfortable with their advice, you could make a huge mistake, and instead of settling the case because of your lawyer's advice, decide to go to trial and get a horrible result.
You know, I'm going to speak to the folks watching right now. There are a lot of divorce attorneys out there. The reason that I trust Meriwether and Tharp is the way that they present themselves. They're not a scorched earth law firm. They want you to have an amicable relationship. They're tough enough to be there when you need to be tough, but they want you to be a mature adult and get through this with as least little pain as possible.
Exactly.
Lee Meriwether, law offices of Meriwether and Tharp, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Hey, folks, don't get off that couch. Yeah, stay comfy where you are right now. We have lots more Trust TV right away.